Kia ora koutou. My name is Bianca Muponda from the School of Architecture, Unitec, Auckland. I will present the joint paper with Annabel on evaluating Great Zimbabwe through analytical drawing. Great Zimbabwe is a compact web of giant stone covering an expanse of hills and valleys, unembellished vastness, juxtaposed by the humble character of the countryside's modest, gentle plains filled with savanna woodlands and scarp made from granite hills. Located in Zimbabwe, in which the country borrows its name, it sits between the town of Masvingo and Lake Mutirikwe, lying on 4,000 to 5,000 feet on a scarp in the high plateau, spanning at 722 hectares, making it the largest settlement, a collection of ruins in the south of the Sahara in Africa. Accepted to be the capital of the Kingdom of Zimbabwe during the late Iron Age between 11th and 15th century, the old city contains approximately 182,000 feet of stonework. This paper uses the architectural notion of analytical drawing to evaluate the plans of Great Zimbabwe, investigating the form, function, and features that are crucial to understanding the origins of the site. Many theories exist regarding the origins. However, the analysis mainly draws into academics. American and resident of South Africa, Professor Emeritus Thomas Huffman, and Zimbabwean-born South African residing Professor of Archaeology, Innocent Bikerai. Huffman's assessment of Great Zimbabwe focuses on the most probable functions of the ruins. He acknowledges how the Shona tribespeople correlates hills and height with status and leadership, which is essential to note regarding the location of the ruins. Huffman identifies strong themes within the structure, such as the private and the profane in the front section, and the private and the sacred at the back, as well as strong male and female themes along the length of the building, symbolized by monoliths and parallel passages with long grooves, respectively. One could draw a similar parallel in terms of the form to the work of sculptor Richard Sierra. Innocent Bikerai goes into more detail to discuss the form of the structures, how not only Great Zimbabwe, but other ruins that came after, such as the Kame ruins and Bulawayo, both of which represent two distinct styles related to natural form. Bikerai examines the role of stone architecture in tradition and clarifies how social and political power are derived from ideological concepts of nature and are enacted through the built environment via monumental architecture. Great Zimbabwe lies on a high plateau that forms a watershed between the Zambezi and Limpopo rivers, making it a cool, well-watered area. The site lies close to two ecological zones, the hills immediately north of the ruins, which are part of the gold belts of metamorphic rock that produce heavy but very fertile red clay soil, and a few miles south, the country descends into a drier, more open grassland, ideal for animal farming. The most striking hills are enormous, smooth, bare, rounded, and formed by the exfoliation of thin layers of rock marked by daily temperature changes caused by clear skies and tropical sunshine. The fractured planes of the granite ensure that the broken pieces all had very regular cuboidal shapes with parallel tops and bottoms, vertical sides, and standard thickness, thus lending themselves to a building technique of rough horizontal layers. The granite blocks, along with the red clay, provided an extremely accessible, abundant, natural source of building material, and this is how Great Zimbabwe was built. The ruins can be split into three sections, first being the most visible and dominant, the Great Enclosure, the second, the Hill Complex, and lastly, lying in between the two, is a compilation of small ruins collectively named the Valley Ruins. The walls of Great Zimbabwe were constructed with outer faces of matched stone, selected from the flush surface of close-fitting stones with between filled with more irregular shaped stones. The two were never bonded together into the fill, and the layers were laid without mortar, to make 4 to 17 feet thick walls, resulting in the height approaching double the thickness. According to Peter Galak, the stone walls never supported roofs, as evidence for them has never been found. The walls do not follow a specific pattern. They meander and sprawl seemingly unorganized over the whole site. All the walls are curved with no straight walls or sharp angles. Instead, they change slowly and continuously indiscriminate. Some walls have synergistic relationship with the boulders on rocky ground. They either incorporate, begin at large boulders and finish against them, or merely fill the gaps between them. Changes in slope or nature are not considered, but instinctively adapt to level soil areas, upbrook slopes, and over boulders, giving them a quality of seclusion. Bordered by continuous walls, smaller, separate enclosures are found within the site, internally containing several detached houses made of daga. Daga is Africa's most common building material, indigenous, a puddled clay soil bonded together with a fine gravel aggregate. The highlight of the critical relationship between stone walls and daga structures is the Mond ruin, a small independent structure on the periphery of the Valley Ruin complex. Galak explains that this architectural system of external stone-walled courtyards outside circular dwellings of daga, forming a single functional unit, was the planning basis for all enclosures at Great Zimbabwe. As other capitals similar to Great Zimbabwe were occupied till the 19th century, Thomas Huffman writes that Shona oral history, ethnography, and Portuguese documents were used to model the special code of the site. However, this has not been adequate in explaining the precise function of the enclosures. According to his analysis, the center dominated by the large hill, the Western Hill Ruin, can be identified as the official residence and audience chamber of the king for the following reasons. Firstly, leaders are referred to as mountains in Shona proverbs, and poetry is part of metaphorical association between height, hills, and high status. Secondly, the early explorers, the Portuguese, described kings in Shona capitals as characteristically living on hills. Thirdly, prestigious stone-walled enclosures at most Zimbabwean settlements are on top of hills, such as Kami ruins, Ruanga ruins, and others. Fourth, bronze spearheads and iron gongs, symbols of leadership, were found inside the hill ruin. And lastly, the western enclosure has the most substantial residential remains, while the eastern enclosure behind the king's residence contained remains of important ceremonial items like soap, stone bowls, and the famous Zimbabwe birds, and adorns significant spiritual features such as towering boulders and rock shelter. Ancestor spirits are associated with hills in the same way as important men as opposed to commoners. They are said to intercede with God for rain and other concerns. Thus, the internal features of the eastern enclosure, ritual objects, special position, identified as the national spiritual center. At the bottom of the hill ruin is an open space forming a natural amphitheater, which would be used by leaders as courts to discuss politics as done throughout Southern Africa. This is the only space in the town center that is most likely the men's court, and south of this can be identified as the wives' quarters. A male-female theme is integrated into the organization of the building. Huffman continues to write that most people lived in densely clustered huts outside the stone enclosures, and that those closer to the central hill were probably servants of the king or family members. Therefore, the special pattern of the hill and valley ruins at Great Zimbabwe is the king's palace, national ritual center, and the home of first wife and residence of noblemen competing for leadership, and the great enclosure did not do any of these. The great enclosure is organized according to the profane and sacred principle. All entrances are at the northwestern end, the assumed front, and the southeast at the back. The back wall is higher than front, suggesting seclusion was important and that private sacred activities likely occurred there. This back wall shields a large space made of daga with steps leading up to an open flat surface, not containing residential structures. It contained remnants of cattle figurines and objects associated with girls' initiation schools. The connection suggesting the great enclosure was such a center. Huffman writes that such schools were an important part of centralized political system of Zimbabwean states because Bantu societies divide special environments into networks of discrete locations where specific cultural activities are carried. On the other hand, Innocent Pikirai explores the relationship between architecture and power. Usually, the process of analysis focuses and examines how social and political power are derived from philosophical concepts and then enacted through the built environment. He explains how the architectural space and social agency together not only communicated, but created systems of values, worldviews, and particular social roles. Pikirai is arguing that the construction of architecture in the Zimbabwean culture was not a process of merely reflecting, but producing and constructing social and political power through manipulating ideology, including appropriation of nature. Great Zimbabwe period architecture was then an extension of the natural environment. Amongst the Shona people who live in the southern of Zimbabwe now, predecessors of great Zimbabwe builders, nature does not simply consist of the observable physical world of landscape, plants, animals, rivers, mountains, and other geophysical forces influencing them. Here, natural power correlates to the cultural landscape's ability to extend ordinarily beyond the reach of humans, mainly through the spatial domains of ancestors. As mentioned before, the nature-power connection associates hills and mountains with leadership. Chiefs and kings are buried there, and such places are known for their lineages and consequently serve as a significant basis for conceptual power. The architectural manifestations of which being stone walls, extending and accentuating the natural features of the landscape. The walls define and delineate features, hence drawing them to the domestic built realm. This is appropriation of nature, but also channeling the intrinsic power within it. It is unlikely to have ensued a standard progression because as architecture developed, restricted access to it followed, thus producing a power dynamic. Different wall styles and types indicate the building process occurred at successive stages. This correlates with Pikirai's notion of changing and developing worldview that necessitated adjustments. In contrast, Huffman's model proposes a fixed worldview, a model that does not explain how elite power arose initially, but subsequently expresses architecturally in an already formed state, without leaving much room for change over time. Therefore, Pikirai's elaboration offers a more dynamic interpretation where the construction of the stone walls themselves is a generation of power through time as temporal social practice related to ideological concepts of nature. The drawings presented in this paper have served to take a closer look at the layout of the structures, the architecture in a two-dimensional way, exploring the different elements' relationship to one another. Analytical drawing has been a beneficial tool for describing the relationship of the surviving landscape and that of the imposed man-made structures, albeit much of the dialogue of these relationships are speculative, a 21st century viewpoint on a 13th century structure. Although the original image of Great Zimbabwe is incomplete, analytical drawing allows us to reinterpret and test the quality of spaces in their own merit as they present while setting aside their cultural or social assumptions. Thank you.